Lee Harvey Oswald is one of the most infamous names in American history. But is that fair? Did he really kill President John F. Kennedy and Officer Tippit? In today's episode of Solving JFK, we will look at the eyewitness statements from the Texas School Book Depository building to find out whether the evidence supports the idea that Oswald could have been in place on the 6th floor to fire those shots. Where was Lee Harvey Oswald when the shots were fired?
In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade in downtown Dallas. The first reports say that President Kennedy has been seriously wounded by this shooting. The flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Assassination of President Kennedy. The man is Lee Oswald.
Was Oswald acting alone, or was he a member of a conspiracy? The mission answers, he acted alone.
I work in that building.
He has been shot. Oswald has been shot.
I'm just
Solving JFK is a podcast about attempting to definitively solve one of the most infamous murders in American history. This podcast is committed to following the evidence where it leads, as opposed to reinforcing any sort of predetermined conclusion that I may have. All factual assertions in this podcast are cited, with the majority of them coming from the Warren Commission volumes. You can view the citations and the original materials that I rely on at solvingjfkpodcast.com. One more thing. The JFK assassination provides an overwhelming amount of information to digest. As we work through the case, some evidence will appear to make Oswald look innocent, and some evidence makes him look guilty. The podcast will synthesize all of the information and make conclusions at the end about whether the Warren report got it right, and if not, we'll determine what the open questions are that need to be investigated. If you hear anything during this podcast that you disagree with, or that you think lacks context, you can email solvingjfkpodcast@gmail.com with a detailed explanation of what we missed or got wrong, and a citation to support your claims, and we may include it in a future rebuttal episode. According to the Warren report, around 12:30 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963, Lee Harvey Oswald fired 3 shots from the sniper's nest that he constructed out of cardboard boxes in the southeast corner window of the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building. The School Book Depository, now known as the Dallas County Administration Building, is a 7-story brick building that looks out on Dealey Plaza, a large, open, park-like area where several roads come together. The purpose of the School Book Depository was to act as a multi-floor warehouse for storing school textbooks and fulfilling orders for those books. Oswald applied for a job at the School Book Depository on October 15, 1963, a little more than a month before the assassination. He began working as a temporary employee the next day. Oswald was an order filler, which meant that he reviewed orders of textbooks and then obtained those textbooks from wherever they were located within the School Book Depository. The 5th, 6th, and 7th floors of the building housed the overflow stock of books. The orders that Oswald filled were mostly on behalf of publisher Scott Forsman. The Scott Forsman books were all on the 1st floor and the 6th floor, so it would not have been out of the ordinary for Oswald to be seen on the 6th floor. If Oswald was firing shots on the 6th floor at 12:30, then there should be some witnesses that put Oswald in that position around that time. On the other hand, if there are witnesses who say that Oswald was somewhere else around 12:30, The evidence would tend to support Oswald's innocence. Let's start with the key witnesses that the Warren report relies on to place Lee Harvey Oswald on the 6th floor at 12:30. First, there's pipefitter Howard Brennan. Brennan was leaning against a 4-foot-high retaining wall on the corner of Houston and Elm, directly across the street from the school book depository building. He checked his watch, and it was 12:18 when he arrived at that street corner. Several minutes later, Brennan noticed a man in the window of the southeast corner of the 6th floor. According to Brennan, when he looked up at the window from the street corner, he thought the man was about 5'10", white, slender, and with dark brown hair, between 25 to 35 years old. When Brennan looked up after the first shot was fired, he says he saw the same man with a rifle.
Among the witnesses here in the plaza, the commission relied heavily on the testimony of Howard Brennan, who, watching from just about here, said that he actually saw the assassin firing.
I looked directly across and up, possibility at a 45-degree angle, and this man, same man I had saw prior to the president's arrival, was in the window and taking aim for his last shot. After he fired the last or the third shot, he didn't seem to be in a great rush, hurry. He seemed to pause for a moment to see if for sure he accomplished his purpose, and he brought the gun back to rest in upright position as though he was satisfied.
At a lineup of suspects on the night of the assassination, Brennan said about Oswald, quote, "He looks like the man, but I can't say for sure," failing to identify Oswald when given the chance. So just to recap, Brennan says that he had a good look at the man in the window, and he says that this man took his time and then fired the rifle. But when Brennan was asked at the police station that night to identify the man, he did not identify Oswald as being the man he saw. According to the Warren Report defenders, Brennan failed to identify Oswald that night because he was afraid for his life since he didn't know if there were others involved, and if word leaked that he was the only one who could actually identify the trigger man, he was worried that his life might be in danger. Further, Brennan did tell the Warren Commission when they interviewed him later that he could have identified Oswald that night. He even adds, "I knew I could never forget the face I had seen in the window on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository." Now, there are no obvious credibility issues with Brennan, other than his failure to identify Oswald the night of the assassination, which again, he says, was because he was afraid. On the other hand, Brennan, who was the only witness putting Oswald specifically with a gun in his hands on the 6th floor, was standing on the ground looking up at a face he had never seen before, though he was close to the building. To me, it seems like it would be hard to identify someone in a lineup who I saw from 6 stories below, but then again, I could be wrong. After Howard Brennan, the second witness that is heavily relied upon by the Warren Report to put Oswald on the 6th floor at the time of the shooting is Charles Givens, a co-worker of Oswald's. In Givens' sworn affidavit from the day of the assassination, he says that he worked on the 6th floor until 11:30. He then went downstairs to go to the bathroom and have lunch. There was no mention of Oswald at all in Givens' original affidavit. Then, on February 13th, 1964, a few months later, in an FBI report written by Special Agent Robert Gemberling, additional information was provided by Givens that he didn't mention in his affidavit on the day of the assassination. The report said, quote, "Givens was on the 6th floor until about 11:30 a.m. when he used the elevator to travel to the 1st floor. As he was going down on the elevator, he stated an individual known to him as Lee yelled to close the gates on the elevator so Lee could have the elevator returned to him to the 6th floor." Givens' initial testimony to the FBI did not support Oswald's guilt because of Oswald asking for the elevator to be sent back up so that he could come down. This would mean that he wouldn't be on the 6th floor at 12:30 as far as Givens knew. When Givens was interviewed by the Warren Commission a few months later on April 8, 1964, he added that he forgot his cigarettes on the 6th floor, went back up around noon to get them, and at that time he saw Oswald near the southeast corner window of the 6th floor.
The last man known to have seen Lee Harvey Oswald before the assassination was another co-worker, Charles Givens. Mr. Givens saw Oswald here on the 6th floor.
Well, he was standing about the middle way of the building on the 6th floor.
But what was he doing there?
Well, he was just standing there looking with his orders in his hand.
And what did you say to him?
I said, "Say, fella, it's lunchtime. You going downstairs?" And he said, "No, it says close the gates on the elevator when you get out." Well, I was, kind of excited, want to see the parade, so when I got downstairs, I really forgot it. I just rushed on off and went on out to lunch.
This would be about what time?
Well, about 1 or 2 minutes after 12.
The final testimony from Givens to the Warren Commission was, "I came downstairs and I discovered that I left my cigarettes in my jacket pocket upstairs. When I got back upstairs, Oswald was on the 6th floor in that vicinity toward the window up front where the shots were fired. I was getting ready to get on the elevator and asked Oswald if he was coming downstairs, and he said no." Charles Givens' story to the Warren Commission is in conflict with what his co-worker Bonnie Ray Williams told the commission. Williams said that he heard Oswald ask Givens to send the elevator back up so Oswald could come down for lunch. This makes a big difference. If Oswald is asking Givens to send the elevator down around 11:45, then he could plausibly be on the 6th floor at noon. But if Oswald is asking Givens to send the elevator back up, as Williams claims, that makes it less likely that Oswald could have gotten back into position on the 6th floor by 12:30. One final but important note on Givens. According to an FBI report of February 13th, 1964, Lieutenant Jack Reville of the Dallas Police Department approached Robert Gemberling of the FBI and said that since he had dealt with Givens previously on a drug charge, he thought Givens may change his testimony for money. On May 13th, 1964, Reville told the Warren Commission that he encountered Givens on the same day of the assassination, and Givens told him that he saw Oswald on the 6th floor. Lieutenant Reville named 2 corroborating witnesses, Detective Bryan and Captain Fritz of the Dallas Police Department, both of whom testified before the Warren Commission and were never asked about Givens seeing Oswald on the 6th floor around noon. Why did Lieutenant Reville not include this information in an initial report? It's a pretty big fact for him to hold on to until the spring of 1964 when it comes to light for the first time. He should have at least let the Dallas Police Department detectives know that Givens told him he saw Oswald on the 6th floor around noon because he's the one who sent Givens to the police department to talk to the detectives in the first place. So to recap, we have 2 primary witnesses with testimony that puts Oswald on the 6th floor of the school book depository. First, there's Howard Brennan, the pipe fitter who looked up from the street and saw Oswald and then a gun out of the same window. But he failed to identify Oswald in a lineup that day, even though he later told the Warren Commission that he could have. Then there is Charles Givens, Oswald's co-worker who told the Warren Commission that he left Oswald alone on the 6th floor at noon and who may or may not have been influenced to change his story. There are more witnesses from outside of the building who saw what happened that day, starting with Bob Edwards and Ronald Fisher, who were standing on the street waiting for the presidential motorcade to drive by when they looked up at the school book depository building and saw on the 5th or 6th floor a 22 to 24-year-old white man who looked uncomfortable and wasn't paying attention to the parade. Fisher, who testified before the Warren Commission, said that Lee Harvey Oswald could have been the man they saw, but he was non-committal about that. James Worrell is another person who was there in Dealey Plaza that day, and he saw a rifle aimed at JFK out of either the 5th or 6th floor window in the southeast corner of the school book depository. He says he saw flame and smoke come out of the rifle, but could not identify the shooter since he was standing very close to the building and was looking straight up. Finally, we have 15-year-old Amos Ruins, who says he saw what looked like a pipe in a high window of the school book depository building near the southeast side. He then realized it was a gun after the shots were fired. He couldn't identify the race of the man or any other characteristics except that the man had a bald spot on his head. Now, Fisher's testimony about what he and Bob Edwards saw merely shows that there was a white guy in the window who looked uncomfortable. They can't identify Oswald positively, and they didn't see him with a gun. Ewins and Worrell established convincingly that there was a gun pointed out of a high window of the book depository. But the problem is that neither of them can identify Oswald, and Ewins puts a bald spot on the head of the shooter, which Oswald does not have. Carolyn Walther says she saw a man in a white shirt leaning out of the southeast corner window of the school book depository with a rifle in his hands pointed down. The man had blonde or light brown hair and was looking down the street where the motorcade was about to come around the corner. She also gives the show-stopping testimony that she saw a second man behind the shooter in a brown suit coat. We'll look closer at that allegation next time. Walther says that she was certain that the man she saw with a gun and the man behind him with the brown suit coat were not on the 6th floor, and instead were on either the 4th or 5th floors. Now, because we know that Texas School Book Depository employees James Jarman, Bonnie Ray Williams, and Harold Norman were all on the 5th floor at the time of the shooting and said that they thought the shots came from above, it would be surprising if Walther was correct about the floor. Arnold Rowland was another important witness in Dealey Plaza that day. He saw a light-skinned man with dark hair with a rifle on the 6th floor at 12:15, but he saw the man in the southwest corner, the other side of the building from where the sniper's nest is allegedly located. He also saw another man on the 6th floor that Rowland identified as being black and about 55 years old in the southeast corner of the 6th floor where the sniper's nest was located. He says that the man was there from about 12:15 until 12:25. Rowland described the man as being, quote, practically bald. The counterpoint to Rowland's testimony of seeing two men on the 6th floor at the same time and the shooter on the opposite side of the building from the sniper's nest is that Rowland just must have been mistaken. And likely the mistake that Rowland made was seeing three black men on the 5th floor, Jarman, Williams, and Norman. But Rowland is saying that he saw a 55-year-old bald black man. He also acknowledged that he had separately seen the group of black men sitting in the window on the 5th floor. That is very specific. Personally, I don't believe someone could mistake three men in their 30s for one older man in his 50s, especially when the person specifically addressed it. When you combine the testimony of Walther and Rowland with that of Fisher, Brennan, and Worrell, it establishes that there was a rifle on the 6th floor in a window, and that shots were fired from the 6th floor. We know that. But Walther and Rowland provided additional details that do not fit the official story. Walther is saying that she saw another man behind the shooter, and that supports a finding of conspiracy because of multiple people being in on it, even if they're all in on it from the school book depository. As does Rowland's testimony that he saw two men in different corners of the 6th floor, and the one with the rifle in his hands was in the southwest corner window, the opposite corner from where Oswald's sniper's nest allegedly was located. Rowland also potentially corroborates the bald spot on the shooter that was seen by Amos Ruins. The next important witness is Bonnie Ray Williams. Williams finished his fried chicken lunch on the 6th floor minutes before the assassination. Williams said that Oswald asked for an elevator to be sent back up when he saw Oswald on the 5th floor at 11:45. That was because Oswald was coming downstairs for his lunch, as Charles Givens had also initially told the FBI before changing his testimony. Williams had his lunch on the 6th floor in front of the 4th window, about 40 feet away from Oswald's alleged sniper's nest. He says he couldn't see anything in the southeast corner because the books were stacked so high. The big question about Bonnie Ray Williams is, what time did his chicken lunch really end? According to his FBI interview, he was done with lunch at 12:05. Williams tells the Warren Commission, and they accept it, that the actual time he finished his lunch was 12:20. What we know from Williams' testimony is that he did not see or hear anyone else on the 6th floor while he was eating. Assuming the Warren report time of 12:20 for the end of his lunch is correct, that means that if there was an assassin on the 6th floor, they must have arrived after Williams left. Or the assassin must have been very sneaky and hiding behind some of the stacked boxes. If Oswald arrived on the 6th floor after Williams left, he wouldn't leave himself much time to get set up for the shot. One more thing to add here. The shots were fired from the southeast window, but the only way to enter or exit the 6th floor was the stairs or the service elevator, both of which are in the northwest corner of the building. Now, having been to the school book depository building recently, I can tell you it was much larger inside than I imagined it would be. Also, the layout of the stacked boxes on the day of the assassination is such that Bonnie Ray Williams could have gone to the right and the assassin could have gone to the left, and they would have never seen each other. The motorcade schedule called for the president to be at the Trade Mart by 12:15, which would have put him in Dealey Plaza at around 12:10. If Oswald came up after Williams' lunch, that already makes him 3 minutes late to take the shots if the motorcade is on time. If Oswald was really intent on killing the president, would he have risked the chance to miss his only shot at killing the president? And remember, Arnold Rowland first sees the rifle in the window at 12:15. So if the Warren report time of 12:20 is when Williams finished his lunch, then the shooter, whoever it was there with Williams on the 6th floor at the same time. Harold Norman and James Jarman were co-workers of Oswald's who witnessed the assassination from inside the school book depository. Both Norman and Jarman gave television interviews after the assassination, highlighting their interactions with Oswald that day. Here's Harold Norman.
That particular morning, 3 or 4 of us were standing by the window, and Oswald came over, and he said, what's everybody looking at, and what's everybody excited about? And so we told him we were waiting on the president. So he just snurged up and walked away.
And here's what James Jarman had to say.
I was talking to him around about 10 o'clock. On the outside of the building, some people had gathered. And he asked me what was they gathering around out there for. And I told him that the president was supposed to come by that morning. And he asked me what time, and I didn't know what time it would be, but some of the people had started gathering around. And he asked me which way would the president be coming. And I told him. And so he said, oh, yeah. And I said, yeah. And then he turned around and walked off.
Next, we have Billy Lovelady, another one of Oswald's co-workers who said that Oswald asked for the elevator to be sent back up when he saw him on the 5th floor at 11:45 because Oswald said he was coming down for lunch. William Shelley, the supervisor at the school book depository building, says that he saw Oswald on the 1st floor at 11:50 when Oswald came down to eat his lunch. These are good markers to establish a timeline, but still, other than Brennan, the only witness who puts Oswald specifically on the 6th floor is Charles Givens, who says he sees Oswald around noon. That's still 30 minutes before the shooting. The goal for this episode is to figure out where Oswald was when the shots were fired. We're looking for evidence that puts Oswald on the 6th floor around 12:30, which was the time of the shooting. So far, the strongest witness for the idea that Oswald could have been in place to fire the shots is Howard Brennan. Now, Brennan was outside of the building and he was across the street looking 6 stories up. And while Brennan told the Warren Commission that Oswald was the shooter, he did not identify Oswald that night at the police lineup. The other witness who potentially makes it look like Oswald could have been on the 6th floor at the time of the shooting is Charles Givens. But Givens' testimony merely puts Oswald on the 6th floor at noon, not 12:30. And there's evidence that Givens may have changed his story for money, according to Lieutenant Jack Reville. All of the other witnesses that we've heard from so far do support the idea of there being shots fired from the 6th floor. But we don't have any other witnesses that say that Oswald was near the 6th floor at 12:30. And Bonnie Ray Williams, who ate his lunch on the 6th floor sometime between 11:45 and 12:20, didn't see Oswald on the 6th floor when he was eating his lunch there. Williams actually says that he saw Oswald going downstairs for lunch around 11:45. On the next episode of Solving JFK, we'll continue looking at witness testimony from inside the school book depository, including Officer Marion Baker, who confronted Oswald, Carolyn Arnold, who saw Oswald downstairs around 12:15, Victoria Adams and Sandra Stiles, who went down the stairs that Oswald would have gone down right after the shooting, and military intelligence officer James Powell, who was arrested inside the school book depository building and later released. Where was Oswald when the shots were fired? We'll continue to try to answer that question next time on Solving JFK.
In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade in downtown Dallas. The flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Thanks for listening. Visit solvingjfkpodcast.com for